South Africa has made significant progress economically, politically and socially towards achieving gender equality since the 1956 Women's March. But to what extent do issues of gender equality or gender inequality and gender-based violence hinder the freedom of women? Soul City Institute CEO Phinah Kodisang joins us now to help us navigate that particular question. Good to have you, Phinah, and thank you very much for your time. Firstly, do we have a, shall I say, a common understanding, for lack of a better word, of gender issues when we are engaged in these conversations as men and women and other genders in South Africa?
Thank you for having me, Thabo, and good evening to everyone. I don't think we have an understanding of the extent of the gender issues in our country. For example, Thabo, you know, we have women who do a lot of care work that is not compensated because people still believe that is the role of a woman. A role of a woman, according to our social norms, is to nurture, is to take care. So even when they do that, you know, in their homes as part of work, foregoing employment, mainstream employment, because it does not even have enough jobs for women. We don't compensate that work, right? Yeah. We also don't care enough for the issues that women face because they are women. You know, we don't do healthcare systems that cater for the needs of women. Even when they work in the mainstream, they still have to find a way and navigate a way in a society that I call it hate women. And you see that hate come through in the type of violence that is meted on women. You know, the gender-based violence that you speak about at the femicide, you see the gruesomeness with which it is carried out, and that tells you that we live in a society that really hates women.
We find, I suppose, it easy to immediately associate femicide and the brutality with human rights violation. But something like the issue that you're mentioning of uncompensated work, do we see that gender issue as a human rights issue?
I don't think we do, and we need to see it as a human rights issue. I mean, democracy promised with it, you know, enjoyment of human rights, economic freedom, you know, social justice. And that's what, when we bought into the idea of democracy, we bought into those, you know, but when you look at the reality of women, and remember, women are not a homogeneous group. When you look into the reality of black women, in particular, when you look into the reality of gender non-conforming women in South Africa, we find that South Africa is treating these women, you know, in a manner that diminishes them. It makes them worse off than they've ever been in our country, because the type of education that a black woman is exposed to, and remember, it starts with a girl child and a black child, right? So the type of education we are given, the type of housing we live in communities where street lights are not a norm. We have to take 2-3 taxis, a train to get to work because we were located far away from the economic hubs of this country. And that's a reality of women. And it's a gender issue because it's women who suffer the consequences of having to travel in the AMs. You know, in cities that are dark, being exploited and exposed to dangers, you know, and we are not even seeing those things as gender issues that must be addressed.
It's a broad question, but I'll ask it nonetheless. I mean, from what you're saying, what would our organizations, what would our institutions, what would our spatial planning, what would our transport system look like in a country where gender equality is a priority?
Why do we have to take 2 taxis to get to work? Why can't we have employment where we are? Because we don't see the same happening, for example, where white communities live. Sandton, you know, it's a hub. People who live in that area have easy access to their workspaces. We even now work from the comfort of our homes, you know, those who work in jobs that can allow that. But reality for a majority of women who are doing the care work that I spoke about, who are in informal economy, who are in the informal economy, they are not able to have the privileges that many of us, who work in companies or who live in close proximity to the work, are able to enjoy. So there's a divide, on the basis of class, on the basis of race, on the basis of geography that we must really attend to, because across the different intersections, we find that women, black women in particular, are further and further marginalized and not able to enjoy this freedom that we are saying democracy has brought for us. It's not freedom for everyone. In fact, some women are worse off than, they were 5 years ago before COVID, 10 years ago, in this democracy.
Yeah. Depending on what matrix you look at, others would say if you look at the formations of the C-suites, more women are there now. It's an indication of a position that is changing. If you look at ownership patterns, more women owning businesses is an indication of a changing position. From where you sit, I mean, what do you see that is telling you whether we're improving or we are not improving? And do you believe that the position in South Africa is changing at all?
Look at the pay parity, right? Women are still the least paid, even when they do the same jobs. A simple example, look at Banyana and Bafana. We don't even need to go far. They play the same kind of soccer, same rules. There's nothing different when it's women's soccer, versus when it's men's soccer. But they are not paid half what the Bafana team is paid. Also, if we say women are better off, we still have, and this is statistics that we received, I think the latest early last year, is that women are 38% out of work, whereas compared to 32% of men. So even if we say women are there, they are still not on par with where men are. You look at executive positions, it's still mainly men who sit in those positions. Let's give an example even with the politics. We don't have a woman deputy president in our country. We don't have a woman president in our country. Majority, even if we have women ministers, it's still the men who are making decisions about the lived realities of women in our country. So we are not yet there. The gap is widening.
When you look back at the 29 years, is there a single thing that you could look at and say, maybe this we could have gotten right?
A lot, Thabo, a lot. There's no excuse why in 29 years of democracy we still have women who use pit latrines. We still have women who don't have access to clean water. We still have women who need to travel far just to get to a clinic. There is no excuse, 29 years later into democracy, why the state of women in our country is getting worse. There's no excuse why women are dying in their numbers in a democratic country that promised the protection of the rights of women, that, that promise that women will now have freedom to choose who they love, freedom to exercise whatever sexuality they want to belong to, but they get killed for exercising that. So there's no excuse, honestly.
So if we were to do one thing today that would have the biggest impact in moving us forward as far as gender equality is concerned, what would that be?
Is to really walk the talk. We say a lot of things in our country. We promise a lot of things. Can we see the political will? And the other day we were talking about the example where we could have had a woman chief justice in our country. Why didn't we use that opportunity to show the intentionality of our country to put women forward? So if we want to change the status quo, put women in power, let women lead this country. Let us be intentional and not just speak, without walking the talk.
Phinah Kodisang, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. CEO of the Soul City Institute. They're reflecting on this Freedom Day, on the strides we have made as far as gender equality is concerned.